for me, one of the most important steps is concealer. So as you can see, maybe, there looks like there's a little bit maybe of some purple shadow from my eyeshadow. I purposely left this there because I want to show you the first step that I find is so important before applying concealer, and that is to make sure your under eyes are nice and hydrated. Now, I already applied my eye cream this morning, but that was a good hour or more ago. So my favorite thing to do is to apply my eyeshadow first and then go in with some almond oil and a Q-tip to clean up under the eyes and to also add a little extra moisture. So I buy a huge old bottle of almond oil and I transfer it into this Too Faced Plump and Prime bottle. I've had several of these and they're so beautiful. I can't bear to throw them away. So the brand that I use is Now Solutions. It's a very high quality but inexpensive brand. So I just put a little bit of that on my metal palette here. I'm using a Q-tip and now I'm going to go under the eyes. And don't worry, we're not going to leave this pool of oil here. But what I'm going to do also, this step is helpful, and I'll talk about this more when I do the eyeshadow building block video, but you can use this almond oil to help create the proper angle for your eyeshadow. Now, I have a tissue on my desk here. I just like to take my finger and wipe off the excess and then tap in what remains. So you definitely don't want this under eye area to look super wet and oily, but you also want to make sure that there is still some hydration. Now, why almond oil? Almond oil is a wonderful oil that does soak into the skin rather quickly, and it won't disturb your makeup, but it also has some really great kind of long-lasting hydrating benefits. It's really good for the skin. So just like that, I have added a little bit of moisture. You can see that extra fallout from the eyeshadow, and that is so important to clean up before going in with concealer because I'm already working with purple and blue. I don't need any eyeshadow to add to my issues down here. So, all right, now let's talk about concealer colors, and correctors. If you're somebody who is blessed without very much darkness at all under your eyes, all you're gonna need is a concealer, and I'll talk about the color in a moment. If, however, you're somebody like me who has quite a lot of darkness, discoloration, you are gonna wanna think about doing a corrector first. What that's going to do is counteract the strong color difference between that and the rest of your skin. The level and color of that color corrector is going to be determined by your undertone of your skin and the color of your circles. Some people have more brownish red tones in their under eyes, and they're going to generally want to go with the opposite of color wheel from kind of reddish brown would be yellow. And then if you have more blue purple, then you're going to want to go more in the orange peach, possibly into the pink tones. Now, what determines whether you do orange or pink is partly your skin's undertone as well. So I am kind of more of a medium undertone and I have yellow in my skin. And so if I'm more tan, like I am now, a lighter color corrector like this one, this is a very light shade of peach, this might not be dark enough, especially if I have super dark circles. If I go in with a color corrector or a concealer that is too light, all it's going to do is just kind of make that area look gray. That's not what we want. So you need to look at how dark your circles are and also the depth of your skin tone. And you want to make sure that the level of color correcting matches your level of darkness. Now for today, I'm using a brand new concealer that is out on the market. It's from Natasha Denona. This is her High Glam Concealer. I have one corrector shade, and I'm gonna show you a trick on, I'm gonna do my right eye first. And this is a trick that I saw her doing that in particular helps those of you who have real puffiness under your eyes. I don't have a lot of puffiness, but I do have a pretty dark trough right there. So this trick will help greatly with that. So I'm going to take the color corrector shade C3. And again, I chose this based on how dark my undertone of my skin is. So she has this available in so many shades. What I'm gonna do is I'm just going to go real, like right on the other side and into that trough there. And then I have also discoloration here where the skin is thin enough. You can see my blue blood vessels underneath there. So I'm gonna add just a little bit there. All right, and then I'm going to take one of my all-time favorite tools for applying concealer, color corrector. It's the BK Beauty A506 brush. I'm sure you've heard people talk and rave about this. It is a great brush. There are a couple of similar brushes. There's this one from Sephora. This is the 71 brush, but it's, I think, as expensive, if not more than this one. So I think this is one of the best brushes. Now, just like with the foundation, if you go in with a damp beauty sponge, you're actually going to be removing coverage. So if your concealer, if you need full coverage, you'll want to go in with a brush. So I have let that sit on my eyes for just a little bit, and I'm going to be careful to blend this, not over the entire eye area, but just in that trough and slightly below. And then I'm going to pat right here in this area. And do you see what a difference, especially when I tilt my head down? Because it corrected that color, it balanced it out so that it looks almost like my skin tone. Now, up close and personal, you may be able to tell I do have a little bit of a peach tone there. It's not super noticeable, especially from far away, but it's something that I'm going to want to add a little bit of concealer now to cover. So let's finish up this eye and then I'll talk about this one. Now I'm gonna go in next with a neutral shade instead of yellow. So my skin tone is more yellow, but I still want to have that hint of some color correcting under my eyes. So I'm gonna use the shade P4 and in the same concealer from Natasha Denona. And now I'm just going in with the tiniest little bit here. And then I'm just going to add a little touch right here. Back with the same brush. I'm just going to very lightly blend this over that corrector, just slightly. And then be sure that you blend a little bit here. And again, we're talking in particular about those of you who have puffiness under the eyes. By doing that, by using either your exact match for your face in that upper part right under your lashes, or real close like what I did today with that P4 concealer, it makes it look like that puffiness has receded. And then that trough is nice and bright and the under eye looks flatter. Now on this eye, I'm gonna do something just slightly different. It's similar, but slightly different if you don't have puffiness, but you still have the darkness. So going back to the color corrector, again, this is C3. I'm going to only place this in the areas where I have darkness. So it's a similar spot here, and then I have a little bit here. But this time I'm going actually just in the trough, little dot there. And one of the biggest important things with concealer application, you want to make sure you do not apply too much product. So if you apply an amount like this and you find it's creasing and it's not supposed to crease, go in with even less product the next day. All right, I'm going to now use my brush here, and I'm going to be careful not to blend this beyond those dark areas. So just keeping that in the area where I need color correction. You can always go with your finger if you feel like you have just a little too much product sitting there. Your finger is also another great tool for concealer, but I find that the thinner consistency of concealer, sometimes your finger removes too much product. So use your fingers with those thicker concealers like the IT Cosmetics Bye Bye Under Eye. You gotta use your finger for that one. But something like this that is a thinner consistency, I find a brush kind of helps you keep the coverage, but also blend it out in the areas where you need to. Okay, so do you see how amazing that suddenly looks? And that is just with the color corrector. Now, sometimes I might not even go in with a concealer shade. If I feel like everything is concealed well enough, I'll leave it here. But just for the sake of making sure everything is nice and even, I'm gonna go over on this side and I'm just going to add a touch of concealer right here on the outer corner. And then just in the areas where I did not add the color corrector. And this is just gonna make sure the whole area looks even and concealed. And there we go. My under eyes look like I got a lot more sleep than I did. Okay, I'm gonna let this sit for a moment and talk to you because I feel like it's really important to allow your concealer to sit and do its thing and crease if it's going to. I know this does not sound like what you hear on other channels, but especially if you're somebody like me who's expressive with your eyes, you smile and you get those crinkles. If you immediately go in with wet concealer, set those, and then you smile, guess what? All of that extra concealer that might be lingering is going to push out and it's going to get stuck there with the powder that you've already gone in. If you wait just a minute or two and tap out any excess product and then set your concealer, you might be surprised what a difference that makes. Now, some of you might be surprised at how dark my concealer colors were that I chose. And I know probably 5-10 years ago, the big thing you were seeing was going in with a concealer that was maybe 2-3 shades lighter than your skin tone. And you would have this big old white, big triangle under your eyes. That had its moment, but it's definitely not the most popular trend now, and it's just not my favorite trend. That can look really strange, especially in person, but also in photographs, it can look like you just have like white, the opposite of raccoon eyes, right? You've got this white strip under your eyes and that looks very unnatural. Now, before we set the under eyes and finish up this concealer video, I cannot leave without talking about how do we conceal what is on our face? Because the under eyes, I feel like, are the main focus when we think of concealers, but I know a lot of people have imperfections on their face, including myself. You may have times where you have excessive redness. Maybe you have a scar. Maybe you get blemishes still, like I do. And you're wondering, what do you do to conceal that? Now, it may be necessary for you to purchase a different color and a different formulation for your skin concealing than you use under your eyes. Now that sounds a little bit extreme or strange, but hang with me here. If you are trying to conceal something on your face, you need it to end up being the same color as your foundation. And as we went under the eyes, I used neutral peach tones because I had blue and purple colors to correct there. But on my face, if I use a peach tone concealer to cover a blemish or hide redness, I'm gonna end up with peach spots, and I don't want peach spots. So it's real important to make sure that you also have a concealer that matches your skin tone, your foundation color, basically. And what I like about this is you can actually choose a totally different formulation. The Tarte Shape Tape, you know, one of the most popular concealers on the market today. This is way too dry for me under the eyes, but I love how full coverage this is and how long lasting it is, and it does a great job at concealing areas on the face and lasting throughout the day. Now, there certainly are drugstore options. Again, I'll list some of my favorites down below, but again, you may need to go in a higher end version just because you need more color selection, because you do want your face concealer to match your foundation. Now, as we talked about under the eyes, if you have extreme redness or maybe a birthmark or something that is an extreme color difference than the rest of your skin, you are going to want to go in and color correct that area. And LA Girl has a whole line of these skin correcting shades. They're only like $3.99, $4, something like that. So this is an inexpensive way to get the color correction that you need first. They come in green, red, dark peach. They also come in a white shade that you can use to lighten up a concealer or a foundation shade that you might need. So don't be put off by that extra step thinking, oh, I gotta spend a lot of money. I feel like a color corrector, especially on your face, there are some inexpensive options, but you definitely wanna go in first with a color corrector if you have extreme color that you're working on first. But because I used a full coverage foundation, I feel like I don't need a whole lot of concealing on the rest of my face. There are a few spots, so I'm gonna show you my favorite way to conceal without it being real obvious that I've added concealer. Now this new Natasha Denona concealer, I did find a good kind of skin match, at least for right now. It's YP8, so the Y meaning more yellow, and so this, what I'm going to do is just in any areas where I have a little extra little redness peeking through, I'm just going to tap, and you can see I'm not swiping on a big old swatch of concealer in those areas. Now here I'll add a little more than on those spots. So the key when you're concealing spots is you just want to go right on top of that spot. And we're gonna let it sit for a moment. Another thing you can do, this is Lisa Eldridge's favorite way to do pinpoint concealing. She takes a fine eyeliner brush like this and dips it in the concealer and then just goes right on the spot. And that is another way to make sure that you don't go over or too far outside the actual spot that you're concealing. All right, I'm not gonna go crazy. I usually don't do this unless I have a really, really major blemish or something. But if you're doing photographs, or again, if you have something that you feel insecure about that you want to conceal, this is certainly something that you may want to do more on a regular basis. All right, now what you want to do is, I prefer either with a finger tapping over that spot, and again, tap, 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 tap. This is also why I don't do this every day, because you need to take your time, and I don't always have time to do the light tap. If you go in real quick and rub it, you're gonna remove all of that concealing. The other way you can do is just take your your foundation brush, which is real helpful in just making sure that in the end that blends in, and all you're doing is actually just pushing that coverage in, and as it goes in, it's slightly blending out the edge of that concealing. Under the nose, typically I'll take my foundation brush and just kind of whisk that away. Because we used the Max After Paint Pot, that helped reduce some of the redness. And if you're wondering what on earth I'm talking about, you need to see my foundation video. And there we go, we are all concealed. Now, the final step under the eyes, I said we still need to go back and talk about powder. Okay, so as I've let that sit for a few minutes and I've been talking expressively, I have just a hint of some creasing. It's not too bad, but you can either go in with your finger, you can go in with your brush, you can take your damp beauty sponge. I'll do the damp sponge on this side, and then I'll show you another option on the other. I feel like sometimes your finger picks up too much product. So I like to do just a slightly damp beauty sponge, or this is an Undereye roller ball, but it actually doesn't roll. I don't know, this is by KIKO Tools. And sometimes what I'll do is just tap right over my creases there and remove any excess product that may have been hanging out there. And it also, because it's cooling, it kind of shrinks up the skin there just a little bit, and then go in with our powder. And I'm going to go into greater length of differences of setting powder versus finishing powder in my powder video. But for now, I want to show you my favorite under eye setting powder of all. I have a few more, I'll show you then, but this one is the Makeup Forever HD Ultra Micro Finishing Powder. And what makes this different than all other setting powders or finishing powders that I have used so far is this is the ultimate lightweight, not only powder, but this is a silica-based powder. And this one in particular also has dimethicone in it. So you can feel the slip on your fingers. And why I feel like this is the best powder above all under the eyes is because you really do not want to add a huge thick layer of powder. And I know some of you are like, powder, I'm just out altogether. But I want to encourage you to give this one in particular a try. And the reason why I say that is because this is so ultra lightweight, but the finishing aspect, what this does on concealer is it creates almost like a waterproof barrier on the top of your concealer, and it keeps it from creasing throughout the day. You'll still see your lines and things, you know, form, but you're not going to see that concealer and the powder balling up and accentuating those lines through the day. All right, enough talking. Let's just apply this. Now, I am using a fluffy brush. I'm tapping off the extra. And actually, sometimes what I like to do is just tap on the back of my hand to make sure I do not get too much product. All right, I'm going to just tap under the eyes. Now, why do we even need to do this step? Not only does it help the concealer stay in place throughout the day, even self-setting concealers like this Natasha Denona one, like the Makeup Forever one, I find that even just by putting just a light layer of powder does two things. Not only does it help it last better throughout the day, but it also helps reduce the look of puffiness under the eyes. If you have added shine there, that can accentuate puffiness under the eyes, but by adding just a little bit of mattification right there under the eye and in this part of the face, you don't have to powder the rest of your face. If you're a super dry skin person and powder freaks you out, you do not have to do the rest of the face. But if you do that whole, do you see how perfected that looks? And trust me, it's not, but it is the power of applying the right products in the right way. All right, so I'm purposely not powdering this side just yet because I have a couple of other steps to do for these videos. But before we finish this video, I want to talk briefly about baking under the eyes. So some of you have asked me, what on earth is baking? What do you mean? No, it's not baking cakes or brownies. Baking under the eyes is probably what some of you who are really averse to the idea of powder under your eyes this is what comes to mind. It's where you take a loose powder and you see them cake on a huge thick layer of powder under the eyes. They let it sit or bake for a couple of minutes and then wipe or brush away the excess powder. And on their young skin, it looks flawless. Now, where did this concept come from? It came from stage makeup, and they still use it in stage makeup. But if you think about stage makeup, they're on stage far away, and we're not up close and seeing how heavy and cakey that makes the face look. But when you bake makeup, it creates this almost like an oven. It really locks in cream foundation, liquid foundation, and it really kind of meshes this huge thick layer of powder with that foundation, and it really does help things stay in place really long. However, it is very drying on the skin, and it is not flattering if you have lines and wrinkles. So stay away from baking if you're over the age of, I don't know. I couldn't do it over the age of 35. So if you're super young, go ahead, embrace the baking. But if you are over the age of 35, 40, 50, 60, 70, we're gonna stay away from baking. But I encourage you to embrace the idea of just a tiny little bit of powder under the eyes. As with all of these videos, I will list and link not only the products that I use today on my face, but I'll also list and link some of my other favorite products, other concealers, other favorite finishing powders for under the eyes. But stay tuned for my powder video in this series because I'm going to go into more detail about the difference between setting powders and finishing powders and why a few of them work better under the eyes than others. So I hope that this was helpful. Up next, we have highlight, contour, and bronzing.